Okay, so good morning, and so in this particular session, I'm going to talk a little bit about the broad perspective. In the last lecture, Professor Takata went into very great depth into some of the use cases about particularly for the copier machines and how some of the decisions are taken based on the aspects of reusability. So in this lecture, I will just broadly touch upon several aspects, and I'll give some industry examples. So particularly, what are the problems or what are the issues which basically cannot, which is the impedance for the industries to directly jump into circularity. Because so far what we have known that circularity is must, and it is something that eventually every industry needs to adopt. But there are some practical limitations, some practical challenges which are which one must overcome before one can go into the when it becomes more and more widely adoptable. Yeah, it's fine. Yes. Yeah. So what are the risks or what are the challenges when industries try to shift to circularity? So first thing is, since so far all the ecosystem, all the supply chains have been developed for the linear economy, so that is kind of very much optimized. Okay, so starting from the sourcing. So for example, when a factory is running, it generally has all the contracts, all the information, all the network for sourcing the raw materials. Okay, now there might be at several stages it can happen, but that initial the chain of the information of materials, how it is flowing, that is already established. Suddenly, let's say a factory decides that I want to invest more into circularity. So the major problem here is that, okay, so what happens, how to collect back the items that are already out there in the market. Okay, so it is already in the hands of the consumer. So how do you collect it back? Okay, because the existing supply chains are not sufficient to do that. You have to invest, or you have to build new networks, new ways to make that happen. Okay, so that now the idea is that initially it was you have a source of the raw material and it was directly coming to the factory. Now if you are trying to do the circularity, it is kind of a distributed sources. All the end products are lying with the consumers, which are in a distributed fashion. So now it becomes way more complicated to manage that entire thing. Okay, so for example, you might have seen how do you dispose of your old papers or old books? So typically, there will be some person who is to collect the old materials at some cost. So, but that is an example of a very unorganized sector. Okay, so he is not working under any formal company or formal corporation. So he is just trying to do that locally. But for that to happen, that person has to go to each houses, so he has to know exactly where is the raw material available. Okay, let's say you have sold some pieces of old papers or newspaper. For the next 1 or 2 years, you will not be again selling that. So that information is very much vital if a particular company has to think in terms of sourcing the raw materials for the circularity aspect. Okay, so that is one of the major challenges. Even like establishing proper supply chain to get the material back from the users and the consumers, which is in a distributed fashion now. So he has to go to all the houses, check where the material is there, and then he has to collect that. So that is one major challenge. Now, so one thing is, okay, so let's say even if the product has built some, the design for circularity aspect, okay, while conception of the product, the company has thought, okay, this is the end of the life cycle for this particular usage, and this is how it is going to go in the next use case. But that, in order to channelize that, it requires some additional effort, okay, either from the company or from the consumers. Now the question is, why will the consumers be interested even to, go into that effect? What incentives does the consumers have? So that is, another aspect. So even though you design it perfectly from the scratch, you implement the concepts of design for circularity, you know that the material can be used in a, either they can be reused, or that they can be remanufactured, or they can be used in a different use case in a different life cycle. But eventually how this is going to come into implementation. So that is, one challenge. Now this is a, kind of a dichotomy, like, are companies actually do the companies actually want to have that happen? Okay, now today you see that when you are using a mobile, every year newer and newer models come up. So while the company even be interested in doing circularity, because they are saying that, okay, fine, we are happy with the linear model where we push newer models every year with little bit of upgraded features. Okay, so for the company it is much beneficial, if the consumers keep on buying newer and newer models, newer versions every year. So in a way, which means that if you make your products more durable, it is going to bring less revenue to the company. So that is, very challenging to solve that issue. So in some cases, they also look at the service or the rental model, but again, sometimes that might cause, less revenue. So, unless the business model is developed perfectly, how increasing circularity will actually benefit the company, that has to be, has to be brought into the philosophy of the business. Now, major changes are required. Okay, it is not a very easy task. Okay, suddenly if you tell, companies like, some of the smartphone companies that, okay, look, you have to introduce circularity, you cannot sell more smartphones every year. Of course, they are not going to do that. Okay, so there has to be some proper incentive how it can be done. So some of these problems are still very open-ended. People are still trying to look at how this can be addressed, and in some cases, some of the companies have tried to be very innovative and look at how to address that. So the problem is that the sourcing and manufacturing. Okay, as I mentioned, in linear economy, the focus is how you can effectively bring the material from the source to the factory. So it is a simple optimization problem. What is the most efficient way? What is the most cost productive way? In circular economy, things become very complicated. Okay, so you need to have, let's say, the quality checks for the products that you are bringing it back, whether they are still usable for further applications. What is the quality of the product? What is have they become degraded enough or not? So there has to be another quality check which is not present in the initial linear economy model. Okay. So now if a company is able to exploit these properly, it can also be a source of new revenue stream. Okay, so for example, when the company is bringing an old thing back, the quality control aspect is a big thing. Okay, so then for that they have to invest in new technologies, new ways to do that. And if a company is able to do that successfully, he can then collaborate with other companies as well. Okay, so for example, there could be companies which take the used material back and supply it to other downstream companies. So that itself can become a source of revenue if that can be done properly. Okay. So of course there are some benefits. Okay, we talked about these in details, that if you reduce the demand for the virgin resources, it will be more resilient. You need not depend on the source. Okay, so that will give the company some kind of a cushion effect against some external factors. Okay, and it can eventually be a way to reduce the cost if all the supply and all the technology becomes more and more effective. So the problem still lies in the technology. Okay, the recovery technologies today are not as mature as the production technology, because the production technologies have evolved over the last centuries, and they have become more and more optimized. But these recovery technologies are it is only going to gain more and more traction, maybe from the last 30-40 years. So here is that a long phase of R&D is needed. Okay, if you take any broken part and then how to recover that part, that requires a separate set of skills. Now it may be true that that technology may not be very difficult. Okay, but that research has to be done. That translation from the research to the company has to be done. So this will take some time, but with the increase in more and more focus in circularity, this is all the big companies are now focusing largely on this. Now another aspect is the joint ventures. So if a particular company who is making the product, if it does not have the capability to do the R&D or have the technology, so it can collaborate with other entities who will be doing the research for the recovery from the finished product. So some additional companies, their sole capability will be to how to efficiently extract the raw material from used product. So in a joint venture model, the circularity can be established. Okay, so there will be the key company which does the production, and there will be the another company which will be looking at the how to extract the materials from the used sources. Okay, so this we mentioned about the demand for the virgin resources. Now today what happens is when a company is getting some material from the virgin resources, it has to pay some amount depending on the market rate. Now in many cases that market rate might be subsidized for for whatever reasons. The government or the policy makers, they decide to subsidize the procurement of some raw materials to boost up the economy. Okay, now if that kind of subsidy is not there, if the subsidy for the the procurement of the raw materials is not there, then the companies will be forced to increase the prices. Right now, if that happens, then the companies will, by definition, they will be forced to look for alternate sources. Okay, so the change also has to come from the policy perspective. Okay, from the policy, if the policy is done in such a way that companies are kind of encouraged to look at alternate resources, then that will also help in bringing circularity to a great extent. Another is carbon dioxide emission rights. So typically when a company is building something, so in many economies they have to pay some extra cost to use to basically emit certain amount of carbon dioxide depending on the use of their products. Okay, so if this this becomes more and more costly. Okay, so let's say the companies have to now pay more if they want to emit the same amount of carbon dioxide. Then naturally, for the profit mindset, the companies will look how to minimize the carbon dioxide footprint, how to minimize the carbon footprint. So then they will be forced to look at alternate energy methods or alternate sources. So they will be forced to look at the recycling effects. Okay, so all these things, it is they require significant investment and it cannot be done very easily. Okay, so sometimes it takes decades of investment to first develop the technology, then look at the policy, then develop the business model based on the technology and the policy. So this is one example which have done this circularity in a very nice manner. So Manikan is a Japanese company, and Starbucks is widely known. So what they did to introduce circularity is, so Starbucks they use a lot of coffee beans for making the coffee. Okay, so once they use the coffee beans, typically the coffee beans were put in the landfill and they are used as compost for agriculture purpose. Now they instead of doing that, they collaborated with a dairy farm, Manikan, and what they did was these coffee beans they did make into some kind of some coffee bean cake, which is the fodder for the cattle. Okay, so instead of going into the landfill, they just directly made it as the food for the cattle, and then these are known as the bean cakes, and then these enables the cows to produce higher quality milk. Okay, so now this is there is a significant research involved in that. Okay, so what should be the quality of the coffee beans, what should be the the output of the milk. So all this has been done, and then from the waste of the Starbucks they are able to get higher quality milk. Now this cycle is kind of completed when the milk that is being generated by this dairy farm. So if Starbucks decides to use that milk again for its coffee purposes. So here this is a very good example of how an entire form of the circularity has been established. Okay, so here at one time you are not only taking care of the waste product, but the Starbucks is also getting the raw material from the waste product. Okay, so this is one very interesting example. Okay, so as I mentioned, right, so the important here is that you have to now manage circular networks. Okay, earlier you are managing linear networks. So I discussed this, that in the linear economy, product and material throughput, if you optimize that, it maximizes the profitability. But now you have to connect the chain, then only you can maximize the profitability. So you have to look beyond the core business, and that requires significant collaboration with others. Okay, for example, in this previous case, Starbucks will not have the technology know-how to know what is the best food for a cattle to give the best quality milk. So it has to collaborate with a dairy company or a dairy farm. So they will have the better know-how. So this kind of external collaboration is very much important in a circular framework. So, and even for, let's say, for a very big company, if a very big company it plans to do this circularity, so this kind of internal collaboration is also needed. So for a big company there might be separate teams which develop the product, which looks at the used product. That internal collaboration is also very important, and development of new skills, new technology, all will come when the circular network has to be implemented. So this is again another example which is also a very nice example of circularity. So here Timberland is a shoe manufacturer and Omni United is a tire manufacturer. So typically what happens is when the tire goes up, is being used for some time, so there is a people measure the tread length, and that is used to determine whether the tire is out of its service life, or it can be, or it has to be replaced. So now typically the tire recycling was done by the tire companies. So they take this tire and they again try to manufacture newer tires from that. But here this kind of collaboration happened in a more radical way. So now this tire is made of such material that once the top surface gets worn out, the remaining portion of this tire can be easily used for making a leather type of shoe. Okay, so now this required a significant innovation in the so this required a significant innovation in the polymer chemistry of the tire. Okay, now you have to make a tire which can be used as a tire, but after a certain lifetime it can be used as a footwear. So this had a lot of benefits. It minimized the ending up in landfill, or so it also reduced the use of tire derived fuel. So this is a unique case where fashion and automotive industries, so they are radically different, but they came together and they did a collaboration, and they are able to implement proper circularity in their business model. Okay.
Sir, I have a question on this. If we compare raw materials given by recycled tire and raw material given by leather, which is basically the basic raw material.
Yes.
So if we compare the cost aspect and the complexity of transportation and supply,
yes,
can we have comparison? Which is better, right?
No, so that exact data will be there, but here the point is, if you look at the supply, the source of the supply gets fixed here, because you are now directly getting from that company. So you do not need to source from multiple locations. Okay, now if you are looking at the quality or the cost, so that analysis has to be done. Okay, it has to be made cost effective. So initially, if the technology is not mature, it is sometimes very difficult to get the benefit from the cost. So as technology becomes more and more mature, then the cost also comes down. So initially it may be the case that the cost is higher. Okay, but so what these companies will do, they will use this for the premium segment of their business. Okay, instead of making it for the mass customers, they will charge a little bit higher, and this will be the selling point, the recyclability. So the premium customers won't mind paying a little bit more if they know that this is kind of helping the environment. As the technology becomes more and more mature, the cost will gradually come down. So yeah, this is also another example from the automotive industry. So Renault is a France-based car manufacturing company, and they are in the business of car manufacturing for very long. And Suez is, what they do is they are only in the recycling business. So earlier they were operating separately. Now they have decided to collaborate and fast track circularity in the Europe's automotive sector. So for example, this company Suez had in-depth knowledge of the recycling, which Renault did not have. They have a very good knowledge of the production of the car, but how to recycle them, how to make use of the end products, that knowledge was available with Suez. Okay, and they also had a very good automobile waste management, collection, sorting, material recovery. So Renault decided to use their benefit and they collaborate with them. So now this complete collaboration is completes the cycle, because when the car is being used, so typically the car company has a lot of information about how the car is being used. Okay, so after, let's say, some time you go to the service center to do the preventive maintenance, and that time the company has all the information about each of these parts. What is the quality of that, what is when are they going to fail, or if it is going to fail, they can replace that. But they do not have the information of the recyclability. So once they come in close collaboration, so they can directly give the information to this company, and the recycling becomes much easier, and it also becomes environmentally much friendly. Okay, so these are again, for example, this is also another example where two different companies, they are coming together to close the loop, okay, to introduce circularity. Okay, another use case is when you are developing a product, you have to design it for multiple life cycles for different use cases. So which Professor Takata mentioned in the last lecture. Now in linear economy, that is not a concern. The only concern is how to minimize the cost for a given use case. Okay, you are using a mobile, so let's say a person uses the mobile for 3 years, and for a given feature, what is the minimum cost that I can give to the consumer? But in the circular economy, after the use is over, then the products must still have some value. Okay, then only it can go into the next life cycle. So it has to be designed with more than one user and one life cycle in mind. So this is also known as the product life extension model. So if this model is supposed to be successful, then the companies have to find an alternate way of revenue when they are not selling the product. Okay, they have sold the product for 3 years or 5 years, whatever it is, that is a normal life cycle. Beyond that, if the goal is not to buy new products, so they have to find a way to generate revenue. Okay, so there are some particularly in the digital domain, that is actually quite easy to implement. Okay, so for example, there are some freemium models. Let's say you are buying a PlayStation or Amazon Kindle. Okay, so it has you buy it with some price. Okay, but the idea here is that you do not stop using it after 2 years or 3 years. You might stop playing the same game or reading the same book. So what that is why companies like Amazon, they have their own ebook store. So once you can always buy more ebooks at a minimal price. So in that way, their revenue is not dependent on the Kindle anymore. It is dependent on the additional items that you are buying. Okay, so in a way you are able to extend the lifetime of the Kindle. It is not like the Kindle comes preloaded with 100 books, and when you have used reading that, you have to again buy a new Kindle. Okay, so that is so in this way you are able to extend the life cycle of the product. Introduce modularity. Modularity is always helpful. Like when you are using a remote, any kind of remote, it has a battery. Okay, so basically when the battery gets over, you only replace the battery. You do not replace the entire device. Okay, so in a way then you are able to increase the life cycle of the particular remote for a very long time. Okay, when you have a TV in your home, you do not basically need to change the remote that often. You can use it for decades. You change the batteries often. Okay, and also this another way is you just give it to a new user. That new user will find a different use case. So that is known as the take back, refurbish and resell to a new consumer. So that is you have come across it. Today you can get refurbished phones, refurbished laptops. Okay, so that is with the growth of online marketplaces, that plays a big role. Okay, but today even if you have the same amount of money, most likely people will not go for a refurbished option. They will try to buy a new option. So here also people needs to be convinced that okay, the refurbished option is as good as that, or it has a better let's say service warranty, okay, compared to that of the original product. So some additional benefits must be there which for the consumer to proliferate this model. Okay. This is one example from a European company which is called as a mud jeans. Okay, so instead of they came up with the idea of leasing jeans instead of getting consumers to buy the jeans. Okay, so what they do is like people will lease the jeans for some amount of time. They will use it for that specified period, and once it is over, they can return the jeans back and get a new new jeans. And the company, what it will do, it will then look at the old jeans, it will check whether the quality is still good or not. If it is still good, they will try to refurbish and again sell it to new customers. And if the condition is not good, then they will mechanically recycled as cotton fibers. Okay, and then again they will give it back to some initial some kind of a apparel company, clothes manufacturing company. Okay, so now this same jeans now gets trying to get utilized as much as possible instead of throwing it away in the landfill or in the waste. Okay, so now in order for the circularity to be more and more successful, one important aspect is it requires continuous customer engagement. Okay, let's say if you are buying some object, okay, before buying the object, generally many times you see that the salesman is behaving very nicely. Once the object is you have bought the object, you feel that the service is not good. Okay, so it's a very common problem in many products. So this can survive in the linear economy because it's like a one-off product sell. Okay, but in a circular economy, there has to be a continuous engagement with the customer, because the customer is now the source for the raw material for their further production. Okay, so the companies will have an incentive to give better customer service, so that they are always in close contact with the customer. It will help in maximize the product's utility. Okay, so the companies can suggest how to properly use the product, and that will in turn also give a better reputation for the company. Okay, how to encouraging responsible product use, how to do the return and disposal. Okay, making good after sales service, and continuously keep track of the assets. So when you want to return it back, okay, the company should know, okay, these are the items that are present in different household, and if some of the household wants to return it back, there is an easy way to track that. So that trackability is very important in a circular economy, the continuous engagement. So this is one aspect that companies need to think of. Now this is one example for this industrial equipment manufacturer SKF Group. So initially their business was in making industrial components, parts, gears, bearing. So their sole product was different types of bearings. Okay, so but over the years they have gradually converted themselves from a product based company to a solution based company. Okay, so what they do is they sell all these bearings to a lot of customers, and they put a lot of effort to track the quality of the bearings, whether they are reaching the failure point or not. They do a lot of preventive maintenance. So once their bearings are bought by the consumer, the relation does not end there. It keeps on growing there, and today most of the revenue is coming from that business, not from selling the product. Okay, So this is one successful example where continuous engagement with the customer and pivoting from a product to a service-based model helps in building circularity in the industrial aspect. Okay, of course, as I mentioned previously, the return chain is very important. In linear economy, nobody cares how the item is returned. In circular economy, disposal collection is very important. So I mentioned that it requires additional supply chain capability, distributed collection capability. Okay, so now the raw material is present in multiple locations. It has to come from multiple locations to a single location. Okay, and eventually the customer needs to have some incentive. Okay, so why the customer will be interested in doing that? So one one example is the soft drink cans. Okay, when you deposit a certain number of soft drink cans to the company, you get some money back. Okay, so such kind of incentives are needed, and that incentive should be sufficient so that the customers feel the monetary benefit for that. So one example here is it's called as Eco ATM. Okay, it's a new kind of technology for used electronics devices. So what they had is they have sort of like an ATM machine, which takes the used electronics items. So this machine is fitted with a lot of monitoring models, like based on machine vision and artificial intelligence. So you give a electronic product, it will look at that, and it will try to predict, okay, this is the resale value of that item, and that quotation the customer will be able to see it immediately in front of him. Okay, now once let's say the customer accepts the quotation, then the customer has to give his information, bank account information, ID, everything, and it will be cross verified with their operation centers, where there will be some actual people who will be verifying whether that person is proper, whether their ID is proper or not, and immediately that person will get the cash directly from the ATM. Okay, so he does not have to wait for a very long time. So this is like an instant gratification. You deposit a thing, you get the cash back. So that is like it has been quite successful, and these are the numbers, like 250 tons of device have been recirculated, and from this recycled electronic waste, almost 30 tons of copper, 700 kilograms of silver have been extracted. Okay, so it gives the good incentive to the customer. Also, it helps in recycling to a large extent. Again, Cisco is another big entity, and they have over the years invested a lot in their return and supply chain. So they are into a wide range of businesses where they kind of try to minimize the landfill as much as possible, and they have today it's a very successful model of creating extensive inventory of different pre-owned and transformed products. So apart from that, that even companies like eBay or OLX, so they are also they have a very good return supply chain to introduce circularity. Okay, so I'll just give two more brief examples. Now, again, this was also mentioned by Professor Takata. Like, if you are able to introduce a sharing platform concept, then it is one of the best forms of sustainability. Okay, so you can get a greater convenience, lower price, better product. Okay. So, there are several examples here. One is, room sharing, hotel sharing, like OYO, Airbnb. Today, even workplace sharing is a big thing. Okay, there are companies who just rent out workplace, so that if a startup they wants to they wants to build office space, they do not need to pay a separate rent for that. Okay, and all these effects can be consolidated, and they are able to give a very good service to the small companies who are doing that. Car sharing is a big example, bike sharing. Okay, so all of these are quite well known, and from the environmental point of view, this is extremely beneficial. Let's say if you are doing a carpool, particularly if you are doing a carpool, okay, multiple people can share the same cab, so that will drastically reduce the environmental carbon footprint. Even better is public transport. Okay, so if a society or economy has very good public transport, that automatically means that you are being very energy efficient. Okay, let's say in a typical bus 40 people can go. If those 40 people try to go by car, it will require more than almost 40 times the energy and space. So in all of these aspects, sharing is very much beneficial for in order to introduce circularity. And the last is the product as a service. Okay, so that is also a very very interesting model of improving the sustainability of any business. So instead of selling the product, you sell the service. Okay, so the advantage is you have a very long life cycle, because now the company is always invested in that product which they have leased to the consumer. So even if some small things happen, they will immediately replace it before it fails into a catastrophic failure. Okay, so company is able to better monitor the condition of that. It is much easy to repair, refurbish. So the company will be able to take a call on, okay, I want to recall it back, okay, and give you a new product. And then the companies can deal efficiently with the repair or the refurbishment. So the supply chain issues are kind of sorted out, okay, because now it is in a continuous engagement with the customer. The customer itself is the source of the raw material, because the product, you are not selling the product still belongs to the company, you are selling the service. The consumer can easily upgrade with a much lower cost. Okay. So for example, when you there are many examples here. This water filter subscription. Okay, let's say if you only need to change the filter, you do not need to change the entire thing. The company will do it for you, and there are models where they charge you a monthly fee instead of you upfront buying the entire product. Okay, so the maintenance is easy. It is also pocket friendly for the consumer. One extreme example is the music industry, where they have completely removed the product. Today you do not sell any CDs or DVDs. Okay, everything is streamed online. So earlier you used to pay to the CD or the DVD company. Now you are paying to companies like Spotify or Savan. So now so it is like the product is not there anymore. Telecommunication services. So there are in some countries, when you buy a mobile phone, you also get the connection with that. So the connection is tied with the mobile phone, and let's say you take a 2-year connection, and every month you pay the cost of the connection as well as some cost of the mobile phone itself. Okay, so here the mobile phone that you are using is not your product, but it is being used as a service. And after 2 or 3 years, you will have the option to upgrade your phone. Okay, so using the similar within the same cost structure, you get the maintenance, you get the ability to upgrade. Car leasing is another similar business. Typically, like in some countries, instead of buying the car upfront, you lease the car. Okay, so let's say you lease the car for 3 years, and the company will give you a new car. Okay, and you have to pay them a monthly fee. So the benefit for the consumer is that you will be always be able to drive a new car for 3 years. After the end of 3 years, the company will give you the option. You can buy the car. Okay, you can buy it completely, or you return the car back to the company, and the company will give you a new car. Okay, now the company, after the 3 years, the company will have a lot of 3-year used cars. So now they will be using those cars for car rental fleet or other purposes. So the company has a very good grasp over the entire management and operation, and at the same time, it is able to manage the increase the life cycle of the product to a significant extent. Okay, so in summary, so this just give you some examples of where companies have tried to implement circularity by making and developing innovative models. So still today there are significant risks and challenges which need to be implemented, which will take some time, but slowly it is going there. All these aspects have to be implemented: circularity of the supply chain, multiple life cycles, continuous customer engagement, robust return and collection mechanism. And as an example, sharing platforms or product as a service has been extremely good examples where sustainable models of business growth, keeping in mind the circularity, has been developed. So with that, again, thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay, so then we'll now break for lunch, and we'll continue with the student activity after lunch at 2 p.m.